From being in the title race,
when you're sitting second in the Premier League in December, you are definitely in the title race,
to potentially missing out on Champions League football.
They slide down that table and they start heading out to Europe.
From having Cole Palmer to goalies that look like they can't save a Word document, Chelsea are a story on their own.
Every single individual is getting worse by the week.
In the first half of the season, they were dominating, and it seemed like Maresca's project was well ahead of schedule.
They are a very difficult opponent right now. Nobody wants to play Chelsea.
But now, the team looks defeated and sluggish.
The calibre of players in that squad and the money they've spent, it shouldn't rely just on Cole.
What has caused the Blues to lose games, and how bad are they actually? To understand Chelsea's dip in form, I have to show you what happened with Maresca in his first season with Leicester. Because what Chelsea fans are experiencing now is exactly what Leicester fans experienced in 2024. Maresca was appointed as the manager of the Foxes in an effort to get him back into the Premier League after being relegated in the 2022-2023 season.
We need to adapt because Championship, it's different than Premier League.
It was his debut as a first-team manager, and he made an immediate impact. Leicester won 20 of the first 25 games between August and December. They led the table for the majority of the season and even made it to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. But the second half of the season told a different story. What could have been an easy path back to the Premier League turned into a competitive title race among multiple different teams.
Enzo, I'd imagine you're pretty angry after that tonight.
Yeah, it's disappointing for sure.
In fact, by the end of March 2024, Leicester had temporarily dropped out of the top two teams.
Not very long ago, they were nailed on to be in those top two, probably even nailed on as champions, but there are signs that they could be caught now.
Now, of course, they ended up finding their way back to the top and secured promotion as champions. But there are many parallels between that season and what's happening to Chelsea now. At Leicester, Maresca's system was a fluid 4-2-3-1/4-3-3, which at times would turn into a 3-back in possession with the fullback inverting in. Pereira would come into the midfield to create a double pivot with wings. At Chelsea, Maresca is doing the same thing with Gusto and Cucurella. In midfield, Enzo Fernandez plays as the advanced number 8, dictating play and connecting the midfield to the attack. Beside him, Caicedo plays as the deep line midfielder, offering defensive stability and winning duels to start transitions. Now, the reason that Leicester began to struggle in 2024 is because the opponents began to adapt to Maresca's style.
They should sack the manager tomorrow morning because he's got no plan B.
Teams became more compact defensively and started hitting Leicester in transition.
I know some Leicester supporters, and they won the championship and were still criticising the way they play. They pass you to death. They passed everyone off the pitch. Yeah. But it's a bit boring.
I believe we're seeing a similar thing now, just at Chelsea. In the beginning of the season, the inverted fullback setup caught many teams by surprise. Chelsea would be overloading certain areas of the pitch, creating a numerical advantage, which allowed them to create a lot of chances. Well, it seems that teams have figured them out now because Chelsea went on a run of games where they only had 2 wins in 10 matches. These included losses to Ipswich, Fulham, and Man City, a team that pretty much every other team in the Big Six had spanked. Sadly though, Maresca lost on both occasions against his mentor. He decided to play a high defensive line against one of the most lethal strikers in the world.
I think that's 4 times in the last 5 minutes that Haaland's been 1v1 with a Chelsea defender.
Adding the individual mistakes, and life was made very easy for a team that has been struggling all season. Individual mistakes from players is something that I will talk about more in detail later in the video. While teams have begun to figure out Chelsea's system, Maresca has refused to change it up.
You know, which Chelsea should have done adjusting. They didn't adjust anything today.
He has become very rigid and stubborn, even though there's been evidence that it's not working. Against Brighton, Gusto inverting into the midfield left Mitoma with a ton of space to exploit, and he punished the Blues. Then when Cucurella went into midfield, Minte now had the space to attack. In a span of a week, Brighton had handed Chelsea 2 defeats. Instead of learning from the initial mistakes, Maresca made the same mistake again with an even worse performance from his side.
You're right, his in-game tactics where he's not got the ability to change things. I mean, Frank would be disgusted at this point in the season.
They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Well, Maresca at this point might have to be admitted to the Arkham Asylum to fight Batman. The run of 10 games that I showed earlier was supposed to be a time period where Chelsea could really reinforce their position in the top 4. But instead, we witnessed some of the worst performances of the season. In fact, according to The Athletic, many Chelsea fans have blamed Maresca's style of play for the poor atmosphere at Stamford Bridge.
I mean, there's been some terrible performances to choose from. This is up there. I just think that we're a really, really poor team and he's a really average manager.
The team spends most of the game just playing side-to-side passes, which you can see doesn't really engage the fan base. There's no skill, there's no long shots, there's no directness.
Pedestrian passing game, 57% possession. Way more than Brighton. What did they do with it? Absolutely nothing.
It's hard to get fans out of their seat when they're seeing the same passage of play over and over again, like copy-paste. Maresca tried something new against Aston Villa with Reece James and Gusto both on the pitch together. Reece James was practically playing like one of the center mids and Enzo had pushed up further forward, but it led to nothing. Chelsea took the lead, but Villa looked like the better team for the rest of the game. Not only has Maresca been stubborn with the tactics, but he also isn't rotating players. He has refused to use his bench, even though some of the players there have performed really well in the Conference League. The lack of rotation frustrated several players who ended up leaving on loan in January, which has further weakened the squad. Prime example of this being Renato Vega. He was signed as a cover for Cucurella, but he had the versatility to play in a variety of positions. Yet he was pretty much ignored by Maresca. He ended up going to Juventus and immediately playing for them and playing well. As the season progresses, fatigue is only going to get worse, and you could see even more injuries coming from players that have been run into the ground due to the lack of rotation. Chelsea's initial center-back partnership of Fofana and Colwill was good, but since Fofana's injuries, Maresca hasn't adapted well. Disasi was often played out of position at right back, and now he looks great as a center back at Aston Villa. They did their best to get rid of a loyal player like Chalobah, only to recall him back. And now without Fofana, Colwill hasn't looked the best. The back line consistently makes individual mistakes that directly lead to goals. And then behind the shaky defense is an even shakier goalie. One of Maresca's first real big mistakes at the club was his insistence on Robert Sanchez being the first choice goalie. Now, I don't know if this guy was part of a money laundering scheme to get Caicedo, or he has Enzo Maresca's nudes on his phone, but he kept being played despite making so many different mistakes. Keep in mind too, Sanchez has been a problem for the club for multiple years now. It's not just this season. He concedes easy goals, puts teammates under pressure with his passing, and makes terrible decisions. I mean, what was he doing against Manchester City? It took until February for him to be replaced by Jorgensen, who also ended up letting in a very soft goal against Villa. Meanwhile, Kepa is doing well at Bournemouth and Petrovic has been doing great in Ligue 1. Billions of dollars spent, multiple goalies signed, yet Maresca put all his faith in a guy that can't even catch a cold. What's worse is the attack has also been struggling. The injury to Jackson heavily impacted the team. While he wasn't always the most clinical, his movement and ability on the ball constantly created chances for others. Without Jackson's movement, Palmer, he gets taken out of games.
Palmer stopped influencing the matches like he was.
He'll receive the ball, but then he has no movement in front of him. Palmer needs Jackson, and Jackson needs Palmer. Nkunku has been played up front, but he's not really an out-and-out number 9.
And Nkunku up front, I mean, what a total waste of money he's been.
And Margue picked up an injury against West Ham. Palmer looked like the best player in the league in the beginning of the season, but now he looks a shadow of himself. The rigid structure doesn't suit him, and often players like Nkunku don't seem to be on the same page as him, as we saw in the game against Villa. He still has some moments of brilliance, but his confidence looks low. I saw him miss a chance against Aston Villa, a chance that he would have absolutely buried if it came to him 3 months ago. Like I said, there's a general lack of movement within the squad, so it's very easy for teams to park the bus or be in a very compact defensive structure because, well, Chelsea's just going to pass it side by side right in front of the defense. There is no risk of them going forward. Palmer is still creating chances, but there's nobody to finish off his chances. Injuries have definitely hurt Chelsea, no doubt, but it also makes a decision to get rid of players like Felix and Chukwuemeka even weirder. Surely if Felix wasn't part of your plan, then you wouldn't have bought him in the summer. It's not like Chelsea didn't know what to expect. This was his second stint at the club. Chelsea has a young team, and this might just be part of the growing pains. Young players tend to have very high highs, but also very low lows. They definitely earned title contenders like it was made out to be in the beginning of the season, but they are also way better than the level they're showing now. Yes, this is a long-term project, but there needs to be signs that the project is on the right track. Getting Jackson back healthy should help the team out a lot. To see just how important the striker has been for the club, you gotta check out this video right here.